We locked the doors. That didn't keep us. Some people had them, what they call, I got a friend called them pet bulls. That didn't keep us. It was only Christ who kept us. And we are thankful for that. And not only did he keep us last night, he kept us all week long, because the danger seen and unseen across last week, it is he who has done something. And only because of his grace and his mercy has he allowed us this morning to be able to come. And this lesson, this profound lesson this morning, let me make you mindful of something. These lessons are not just thought about year to year. These lessons are picked out years in advance. And how prevalent is this lesson this morning, all these lessons that has began at the beginning of the year, as it relates to what is actually going on now. If you're mindful of the fact is that last week, or week before last, well, I'm a senior citizen, so I hear it, but a lot of times I don't remember when it's there. The pastor mentioned God never changes. But what happened is we change and situation change. As relate to this lesson, when these commandments were put forth to Israel, were the first century church. And what happens now is that look at where we are now. We are in this, really you could say the 22nd century is where we are. And the things that the Lord told Israel to do and not to do, we are doing them and not doing them right now. So this lesson this morning talks about Israel getting ready or already ready to be into the promised land where God had promised to their ancestors that they were going to live in the land of milk and honey. So before going in a while there, the Lord wanted to ensure that there were certain things that they had to abide by. And not only that, remember the laws that were already established and that they had to live by. Why? Because he wanted them to be able to live in such a way that the people who were already in the land will be willing to change from their ways and change to the way that God will require of Israel to live. As I mentioned to you before, is that Israel could not have had or would not have had this problem had she done what the Lord told her to do. But because she did not do that, as a result of that, Israel found herself in a predicament where not only does she need to be able to live in such a manner that the people who are already inhabiting the land will be willing to change, but the problem would not have existed. But I got to start looking at this situation. I said, now, if Israel were the only one that were there, why would they have to live by a commandment that God has already instilled in them? They wouldn't have to show anyone it. But that could be all in God's plan. God doesn't tell us everything. What he does is that he put the situation out there for us and expects us to abide by it. Now, the first outline this morning talks about the things that we should not do as it relates to the Ten Commandments. Just look at today, how it says, of the commandment tell us, thou shalt not lie. Thou shalt not lie. Thou shalt not lie. Because in the commandment it said that is something that God hates. He said, a liar will not stand in my presence. So in that, look how, as it relates to then, as it is to now. Lying is almost an acceptable thing in a number of cases, and it should not be. I always told them, now, you get your kids. I look at it because kids are innocent. For the most part, I have 5 of them. Some of them will tell the truth no matter how. Now my baby, it doesn't matter whether she did or did not. She's going to tell you the truth. Whether you get in trouble or not, she's going to tell you the truth. On the other hand, you had some, and I got some now that don't, I'd say grandkids, them and the truth don't meet each other. So in this case, it's all about how you live. I used to always tell my troops this: don't lie to me, because if you lie to me, then how am I to distinguish whether you telling me the truth or not? So in that, It has become a fashion today. And what people have allowed to happen is that it's okay to lie. But that's something God hates. So why do we not call people out when we know for a fact that they're actually doing that? The book says that, well, in the lesson it says, sometimes we allow our friends to slide because they're our friends to be able to not confess up to the truth. But it says God hates that, and we'll say we'll want to be Christ-like. If we want to be Christ-like, we can't do the things that the world is doing. Look at, well, let me say this. We say a lot sometimes the old adage, but it's actually fact, is that grandmama used to say, if you lie, you'll cheat. If you cheat, you'll steal. And if you steal, you'll kill. And actually, there are people who actually do that to you. And when I say people who will do that to you, you look at our white brothers and sisters. They always want to talk about how this country was established. This country was established on God's principle. No, in a lot of cases, this country was established on a lie. Because what they did, they lied to the Indians. They cheated the Indians. They stole from the Indians. And when they couldn't do that, what did they do? They killed them. So in that, we have to be mindful. Don't let people tell us anything in this world today and believe it. We have to be mindful of the fact that God requires us, if we're going to be representatives of Him, to do what He asks us to do. Now, He doesn't make us do anything. He asks us to do those things. In a lot of cases, you look at your own free will and accord that He allows you to do that. But when we don't do it, sometimes He puts something on us, we make us wish we had have done so. So in that, it was saying to us, and who are God's children, lying is something that God hates. He hates it. So if He hates it, we should hate it and not allow it. But today, we sometimes let people slide on that, in which we do. Or sometimes even ourselves. I recall a friend saying, talking about what they call a little white lie. A lie is a lie, I don't care what color it is, or how it looks or who said it. It says, well, y'all too young to know anything about this, but when we were kids, did not like you go to have today, where you go to an insurance agent, they sign you a policy, and you send your money either in a check or they deduct it from your account every month. In other words, you may see the agent once a year, and then that's when they come by and say, hey to you, Merry Christmas or something of that nature. But when we were kids, the insurance agent used to come by every month. And you had a little policy. And what they would do, they would, when you gave them the money, they were annotating on that policy. And you better keep up with that policy, because if you didn't have that policy, especially if it was a death policy when it came time to bury, because they were already cheating you, is that when they didn't have the money, they'll tell the kid to go out and say, go out and tell them I'm not home. And like I say, kids are innocent. Mama says she's not home. Huh? So what we do, we let our kids, you starting kids off early, lying for us when you tell them to go. If you don't have the money, just go say, well, I don't have the money, then you have to come back another day. But don't start kids because they learn from us. I look at the situation where we talk about we're a whole lot better today than we were 50, 60 years or 70 years ago. Maybe so. Maybe a little bit, but not a whole lot. Because if it were so, we would not be having this situation that we're having today. It's actually taught. You got young people marching up and down the street telling people Jews won't replace us. The Jews won't replace. These are white kids. Jews won't replace us. They're teaching racism to their kids at the age that they are, early age. So It's a matter of interpretation as to whether we're doing better than we have done in the past. So Christ says, don't lie. God said, don't lie. I don't want you to, because if you lie, how then am I to determine whether, when a situation happens, whether you're telling me the truth or not? That's all I tell my grandson, fat boy. I told him, I said, fat boy, well, I hope it actually come to that day, but right now, you and the truth won't meet. Y'all never meet each other, not at the age of, because right now it don't make what it is. I don't know why he won't do it, but you have to continue. That's why I always said you can never stop talking to kids. You got to always be talking to them, because when you stop talking, it's a lot of times when they get themselves in trouble. And then the next thing they says is don't follow a crowd to do wrong. Do not follow a crowd. It's good to know your history. It is good to know your history about what happened. I say here because this is where we live. But sometimes looking at what happened before and during our presence here on earth has a tendency sometimes to make you a little bit, well, let me take that back, make you a lot angry about how people were treated. Because when people treat you bad, sometimes you don't have a whole lot of love for them. Even though you have to love them, but you don't have the most love for them when they treat you bad. So sometimes when you look at that, you become angry. And I'm thankful to God that He doesn't allow anger to stay within me. I may become angry for a while, but soon it'll pass away. But look at what happened. Our forefathers, when they wanted to do them bad, you didn't know what happened. If Brother Baxter and if I had an all against Brother Baxter, I didn't go to Brother Baxter. What I do is I go round me up 4 or 5 different others. That's what I call cowards. They won't confront the people head to head, but they want to get 5 and 6 and 7 or 8 others to go along with them to confront one Brother Baxter. That's what I want to do. The majority is not always right. They may have the vote, but it's not always right. It may be legal according to the law, but it's not always right. So the book said, don't be so quick to follow a crowd, because a lot of times when you follow the crowd, look at what happened to us this time last year. Sometimes you get overwhelmed, or you get caught up, so to speak. But in a lot of cases, for the majority of the people, that was their intention to do what they did. So in that, God's law culminates our life. We don't have a will. It's God's will if we say that we're Christian, that we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be doing His will, not our will. So in that, what we have to do, we have to be mindful of the fact always, not just on Sunday, but 7 days a week, we have to be mindful of our situation as to what God requires of us, what He wants us to do, and how He wants us to do it. Because we're supposed to be examples unto an unfriendly world that Christ, not I will be able to do it, but Christ is able to do it. Comments? Any comments? Any comments? Well, I used to, they don't tell you, and I think I told you before, I was always afraid of a whipping. I mean, if a whipping were that way, I went that way. And my dad, when I would be lying, he went for years without telling me how he knew I was lying. And one day, he said, the reason I know you're lying, every time you get to lie, you get to scratching your head. And I become cognizant of that. So then what I started doing is I started trying to change that. But when you get in the habit of something, it's hard to get out of that, especially when it worked for you. So in that way, what we have to do is that we have to always be honest with ourselves when it comes to doing what Christ requires us to do. Because when He requires of us, it is our responsibility as those who say that we are Christians to be able to do what he asks us to do. Our job is to make, Christ left us with one job, to make disciples of men. How do we do that? By living Christ-like, by doing those things that Christ did. Here lately, as I said, they write these lessons years in advance. Here lately, you look at, and sometimes we glory in that. It says, just because a person is poor and a case comes up against him, don't go along or be on the side of the poor person. Because in a lot of times, the poor person may be actually guilty of the fact of the things that they have actually done. But you look at large corporations, in a lot of cases, we do that. Even when you look at, I take for example, Walmart. A person, matter of fact, here just several weeks to a month ago, a person won a case against Walmart. And I am willing to bet you that at least 80% of the people who read that was happy about what they now be mindful of the fact. I don't know, or according to the evidence, the person may or may not have done what it actually states in the paper or stated in the email. But when it comes to large corporations, because we have that mentality is that they're doing us wrong anyway, they're cheating us anyway, the prices are too high anyway, so anytime anybody gets a verdict against them, it's helping us. But the book says, be mindful of that now. Make sure that the poor person is the one that's the victim here and not the reverse. So it said, don't be quick to run and give judgment to a poor person when actually the poor person is actually guilty of the fact of that. Well, you look at this fact, when I say that, is that if you have that stuff with a lot of dead presidents' faces on it, especially when it comes to appearing in court, is that your chances of being exonerated are pretty good. But if you don't have any of them dead presidents in your pocket, your chances are not so good. But they look at the fact is that the book said don't be persuaded by influence just because who a person is. When it comes to making judgment or to determine whether a person is guilty or not guilty, it should be accentuated on the facts, not on whether the person is poor or rich. But in a lot of cases, people who look like you and I don't get justice. I have not ever gotten justice in a lot of cases because of bias, because of prejudice, and a lot of time because of influence. You look at a number of cases when a person, 90% of the time, 100% of the time, they're guilty. But what happens is, what's the first thing that come out of their mind? Come out of their mouth? I said, when a person, 90% of the time, 100% of the time, they're guilty of the crime in which they're being committed, they're being prosecuted for. But when they get in front of the media, what's the first thing come out of their mind, out of their mouth? Not only did they not do it, but I'm gonna fight this to the end. And they're guilty, all they know that they're guilty, but I'm gonna fight it to the end. Why? Because of the influence that they think that they have. But not only that, you look at a number of cases, just in the last couple of years, there are people, matter of fact, just last week, a young fella was convicted of a sexual assault. And I think he were in jail for 158 days. They found him guilty. But you know what the judge did? Because of influence, the judge said, well, how long has he been in jail? And I guess the bailiff said 158 days, or the person who records the minutes said 158 days. Judge said, well, I think that's enough days. We're going to commute you to time served. Because of influence. Now, you look at the situation of January 6th, last year. If, in fact, it had been people that look like you and I, cemetery would have been full, first of all, because it would not have been any of this tolerance. They'd have been firing to start off with. But look at the sentences that are handed out as a result of that. Basically, it results to a slap on the hand. There was one lady told them, because I'm white, because I have influence, I'm not going to jail. But the judge put her bumps out in jail. But it wasn't for any substantial time that you and I may have received. So there's no justice for it. We know that. But what has to happen is that we as a people are in a lot of cases just too quiet about what's going on or what's happening. And a number of cases it's to us. The Lord doesn't require us to be, that's the reason he gave us a mouth, to be able to use it against those things which not only against his law, but against mankind. So in that, we're aware of the fact that justice doesn't come for us in a lot of cases. And then you have to be mindful. And I always tell my kids, don't be following the crowd around, because a crowd will get you in trouble. If you just something, they call that accessory. If you happen before, if it happened during, or if it happened afterward, they call it accessory during, before, during, and after. Even though you may not have done anything. You just with the crowd. But according to the law, it depends on what it is, you're just as guilty as the person who committed the offense, or persons who committed. Why? Because of the fact that you were with the crowd. So we have to be mindful of that. Don't be so quick to follow the crowd, because the crowd will easily get you in trouble. And then the book actually, it tells you, don't perjure yourself. Don't get on the witness stand and lie. Or don't put your, now what they do, now let me make you mindful of something. What's the word for I in the Bible? Anyone know what the word for I in the Bible is? Thou. Thou is the word for, because there really is no such thing as I in the book. But when you put your hand on this, that's the reason they take it up there. They're saying, well, if these people, which we were found, the U.S. was founded on Christian values. Let me say that again. The United States were found on Christian values. And we have courts, and we established those courts. And if you are a Christian, when you put your hand on this book, you're saying that you're going to tell the truth. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. In a number of cases, is that people perjure themselves every day. People who know better, but they do it every day. And the sad thing about it is that one-eyed devil, it portrays that every day. You look at these Law and Order, Perry Mason, Matlock. What happened? People put their hand on this without any hesitation or reservation, and they lie about what they did or did not. So in that, we have to be mindful of that. And what happens is that we portray that. They portray it every day. And what happens is that allow people to say, well, if Ben Matlock did it, that's fiction. That is fiction. It's okay for me to do it. Well, I guess if Ben Matlock wound up in hell, I guess it's okay for them to wind up in hell too. Why? Because they're listening or they're watching situations that are fiction. If you ever listen to Tom Joyner, when they start discussing things, what was their statement that they normally say? Anybody know? Anybody remember? For entertaining purpose only. Huh? For entertaining purpose only. This is not, people, this is not real. This is only for entertainment. So in that distinction between fact and fiction, and as Christians, we should know that. Why? Because we have our guide, which is the Bible. You look at, when I say that one-eyed devil, you look at all the situations that are happening today. And I just believe what America's downfall will be is same-sex marriage. It's same-sex marriage. Because that is not God's will. That is not his way. And what happens is that when we sitting there watching TV, when that comes on, in situations, program, and we watch them, they're going to keep putting them on. Why? Because people are watching them. But when I see it, I go into another channel. I don't care what it is. As a matter of fact, I won't even come back. Why? Because that is not God's way. So in that, we have to, this lesson is trying to tell us something right now. But the important thing is whether we're listening or not. Any comments? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, Brother Glover asked this question. He says, these conspiracy theories and the truth, how do you tell the difference? Because it depends on what, who and what you're listening to. But let me say this. There's another old adage. If it doesn't sound right, if it doesn't sound right, it isn't right. And the Lord gives us a discerning spirit. I'm going to say this to you. It doesn't matter to me what people say. I listen to what they're saying. If it doesn't sound right to me, in this ear and out the other. But what happened to you? God gives us a discerning spirit to know that which is right and which is not right. And do you know where that comes from? That comes from even before you start walking. Your parents, in most cases, our parents taught us those things that what we should do and we should not do. And when it does not sound right to you, you have to say, that doesn't sound right, and I'm going to leave that alone. And the next thing is that the Lord tells us that we got to love people. But when I know people are liars, or cheaters, or stealers, and even will kill you, I stay away from them. Now, one thing I don't do, I don't be disrespectful. How you doing? And I go on about my business. I do not tarry. I do not tarry. But beloved, we have to, the book says man should always pray. And we have to do that each and every day, every minute, every hour, because if we don't, it is easy, we are easily influenced. And let me say this to you. I think I mentioned this to you before. I'm giving you this disclaimer because when I'm a senior citizen, sometimes I remember and other times I don't. But you remember what the brother said when he turned that music off? They were getting to that good point, that very good point. And he said, what happened? Brother Elsa know that song. He listened to that song. And as a result of that, chances are he know every word of that song. There was something within him that say, I like this song. And it influences us. That's why sometimes I used to sit at my desk, and sometimes I turn the radio on while I'm working, while you're working, and you hear a new song. And what happened, if that's a new song, they're going to play it 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 times that day. And by the time you leave your job going home, what you think is going to happen? That song is in your head, and you're going to attempt to sing that song. And so that's the way it is about what you're listening to. Is that depends on who or what, when, how you listen to, is that what that person says, if you have confidence in that person or you know that person, you're going to believe what that person is saying. So you have to have a discerning spirit. First of all, we know if it don't sound right, it's not right. It is not right. And then it has to be, it doesn't make any difference whether it's my brother, my sister, my wife, my kids, or whoever it is. It's not right. I told a friend a couple of days ago, his wife, he said, I think it's been 19 years, they were hit from the rear by a drunk driver. And she had, I think he said, 7 surgeries on her leg. And he says, this guy had numerous DUIs before that. I said, let me tell you, I learned something early. And I'm thankful. Because this is the way my parents taught us. And I'm thankful for that. I said, you know what? If I'm out on patrol and my mom is drunk, she's going to jail. You hear me? If my mom is drunk, she's going to jail. Why? Because it's wrong. If I take her and not take her to jail this time, next time, I may be the one that wind up, or somebody that I know may be wind up getting killed. All the book asks us to do is do what's right. That's what it asks us to do. But in a number of cases, if it's family, if it's friends, if it's acquaintance, we let them slide, and you have to speak up then. It's what the Lord requires us to do. So in that case, Brother Glover, a discerning spirit that he gives us to say either this is right or it's not. And if it's not, I'm going to leave it alone. And any other comments? Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Everything that runs in your face, don't take it as face value.
You're exactly right. My wife has a good analogy. She says, just what you say, action speaks louder than word. She said, if I tell you a Toyota is the best car that was ever made, and I get you to believe that, and then when I leave here and go out there and get in the Ford, my credibility is gone. Huh? My credibility is gone. And now I got a thing. I believe Toyota makes a good product, a very good product. Probably one of the most, well, you can't say it now, an affordable product. But I wouldn't buy a Toyota now. Matter of fact, I don't think I'd take a Toyota if somebody gave it to me. You know why? Because after January 6th, those lawmakers who opposed the sanction of the election, Toyota gave them $25,000. Before that, most of my cars were Toyota. I will never buy another one. I will never buy another one. So we have to make our money talk for us. Good golly, Miss Molly. We have to make our money talk for us. If we don't, we'll find ourselves, but Pastor, I'm sorry, I've been doing a whole lot of talking. We ain't even got partway through the lesson. But we have to be mindful of the fact what God requires of us. We have to be mindful of what he requires of us. And I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to sit down and shut up. I'm going to try to. The Lord is not accepting any excuses. He is not accepting any excuses. We're saying, Lord, I didn't know. He's not going to accept that. Why? Because not only did he give you the ability to read, he gave you the ability to understand, and he said, ask of him who is able to give. And a lot of times we ask each other about situations the other person don't have no knowledge or have no understanding about whatsoever. But if you want to know something, ask Christ. And when we do that, we ask for an understanding of those things that we don't understand. And when we don't do that, we have to face Christ. Well, Lord, he's not going to accept it. Because you have everything that you need right in front of you. And what it requires of us to do is take the initiative and use that which Christ has given us. Thank you so much for, yes, sir, Brother Baxter. I'm saying to us, these 21st Christians, is that, let me make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What Brother Baxter, the question is this. If you recall some time ago I mentioned to you is that when you go to court and then you're charged with an offense and you tell the judge, Lord, Your Honor, I didn't know that. What he's going to tell you, there is no excuse for the ignorance of the law. That means that every citizen has a responsibility to know what the law says that he or she can and cannot do. And then Brother Baxter, question is that, okay, when we have to face Christ and we say to Christ, Lord, I didn't know that. And he said Christ is not going to accept that remark as well. What I'm saying to you is this, is that Christ gave us the ability, he gave us a mind to think, he gave us a reasoning responsibility, he gave us the ability to read. And not only that, did he not give us not only did he give us the ability to read, but he also gave us the ability to study, because that's what the book requires of it. It didn't say read the book, it said study the book. And so when we have to face, he's not going to say, when you say, well, Lord, I didn't know that, or I didn't do that. And he's going to accept that. It's just like planting butter beans. If you plant them, what's going to happen? It's coming up. So it's coming up again when we say that we don't know, because the Lord has given us everything we need in order to be able. And not only that, he gives it to this young man right here. Not only, I tell you what happened to me, but I'm finishing to sit down. What happened to me is that when I study the word, and I believe I've understood it, and I hear it back to that, it confirms to me that I understand what the Lord has required of me. And I tell you what that does for me. Sometimes you see me, I get a little bit carried away. I get a lot carried away. Why? Because I'm happy that I've understood what the Lord requires of me. So when the preacher preached that back to me, that I've studied for myself and I think that I understand that, that's a confirmer for me. God bless you.